everyone, it's Alex from Risk Academy, and today, just for fun, I wanted to share my journey in risk management. Now, it started back in the early 2000s. I did my undergraduate degree after school. I did my undergraduate degree at Monash University in Australia. Now, that was the first ever intake of bachelors in risk management. So we were the first ever intake of undergraduate students in risk management. Australia is, as you probably know, is quite mature in terms of risk management, and it had a lot of different master's programs for educated people to increase their knowledge. But we were, and there was only about, I think, 30 of us. We were the first ever undergraduate intake. Now, how I decided to go into risk management, that's a whole different story. Basically, just like everybody else, I had no idea what I wanted to do after school, and my dad suggested that risk management sounds fun, and guess what? He was right. So that was interesting. I started studying risk management at university from year one. The textbook we had for the first year was Australian Risk Management Standard 4360, which later became the foundation for the ISO 31000. So yeah, I feel very close to this sort of the Australian school of risk management. Now, when I finished the university, I was twice named the best student in the course, which probably wasn't that difficult because there weren't that many students, but I was best second and third year student. And after I finished university, I joined a large consulting company in Sydney, which was again great. After the university, just like everybody else, I didn't really have any comprehension or appreciation of where I truly wanted to work, so I applied just like everybody else does to probably 50 or so companies. And Big Four consulting company sort of brought my attention because the whole department was called Enterprise Risk Services, and you can probably guess which company it was now. So I expected, there'd be a lot of like-minded risk professionals that I can work and share with. And that was my first surprise. I joined the team, which had close to probably 100 people nationally. And out of those people, there was probably less than a dozen, maybe less than 5, of people who actually dealt with risk, with corporate, business, strategic, operational, financial risk. Everybody else was either an internal auditor or fraud investigator, or an IT auditor, or an IT risk specialist, very narrow, or a probity specialist. So that was my first surprise. Back in the early 2000s, there wasn't really any demand, and hence there weren't really that many consultants doing risk work. So I kind of, from the very early in my career, I started sort of going a little bit ahead of the curve of the popular curve, and that in one sense was fascinating because I had an opportunity to do some mind-blowing things. For example, we wrote the guide for effective risk management for small and medium-sized businesses that was published by Australian Stock Exchange, and we went around all the different states and did role plays, like full-blown theater on the stage for the CEOs and the board members of different small and medium-sized companies listed on Australian Stock Exchange, to nudge them towards better risk management. So that was clearly fun. But really, at the time, we were still doing risk assessments, writing risk frameworks, doing risk training. So it was pretty basic as far as a risk management application goes. Back in 2009, literally at the same time as the ISO 31000 came out, I decided to move to Russia because that seemed like a fun opportunity at the time. And I joined another consulting firm, which was a good experience. Again, there wasn't any risk team, to be honest. There was like two or three people in the whole office, and that was servicing all of Russia and all of the CIS countries as well. I had a wonderful opportunity to participate in the rewrite of the global methodology for that big consulting company, and that gave me a huge exposure to a lot of Australian colleagues that I knew from way back. and to a lot of European perspectives on risk. First introduced me to COSO, ERM, which was a horrible experience. But nevertheless, it was all part of the sort of learning journey. And as a consultant, I was honestly quite naive about what risk management truly is. I thought the ultimate sort of effective risk management is doing a really good risk assessment. Little that I knew that when I would become a head of risk of a large corporation, I would find out that risk assessments have nothing to do with proper risk management at all. So I stayed in consulting for probably a good half of my 13-year career in risk, and I then switched to the corporate roles, and doing head of risk for a venture capital, innovation center, investment fund, and then switching to the private equity investment fund, the sovereign investment fund, one of few in Russia, quite a large one. And that gave me a completely different perspective on risk. That really, I guess, grounded me a lot, because I found out, I think the biggest lesson I had in my risk career is that executives and senior managers make decisions in a very different way and behave in a very different way under uncertainty to what we as consultants believed in. So a lot of high level feel-good slogans really just did not apply in real life. Risk management and me as the sort of professional in the risk space had to become very, very pragmatic. Like very pragmatic. Unless something made immediate business sense and had a very clear direct impact on objectives, on cost saving, on new revenue generating, it just wouldn't work. And I'll give you that Russia is quite a complex workplace, and government-based corporations are a sort of another level of complexity to that. So, you know, the word sinister is probably not good, not a good choice, but it was a tough environment where only things that made absolute sense and they were easy to apply and had a direct impact on the decisions that the executives were making, only those things made sense. And this is where I think I learned my most valuable lessons. Lesson number one, that unless you have data and you're able to quantify something, and unless you can show how uncertainty and different risks have an impact on the objectives or the decisions that executives are trying to make, you really cannot have an equal sort of say at the board table. You have to bring some insight that executives don't already have. I mean, what certainly didn't work is doing workshops, asking information from the business, and then reiterating it back to the business. That did not work. The lesson I learned is that some aspects of risk management, like risk identification and risk analysis, may need to be owned by the risk manager. He has to bring something to the table, something unique to be listened to. That was my first lesson. Risk management basically had to become quantifiable, to be able to have a decent conversation with the CFO or some other executives at the board table. The second lesson I learned in my journey is that single consolidated ERM type framework risk management where everything comes together and there's a single nice risk report just does not make sense. It has zero value for the day-to-day business. It's a nice to have for the board, for the supervisory board once a year. It's a nice picture, but it has very limited benefits for the effort it takes to provide or consolidate such a report. So instead, I went in the direction of having 5 or 6 different methodologies integrated into different processes. So, for example, for low-ticket investments, we used just simple risk mapping, and for material investments, we used Monte Carlo simulation. We integrated different methodologies into private equity investments and into the fund investments. We integrated different methodology for private equity and venture capital. We integrated different methodology altogether, also based on Monte Carlo simulation, for the strategic and budgeting process. And we integrated another whole set of methodologies for integrating and into the sort of the projects that the fund owned. So the second key takeaway from my journey was that single consolidated ERM type frameworks don't make sense. What in fact does make sense is not having a risk management document, but integrating risk methodologies into all of the existing documents, into the investment management procedure, into the budgeting procedure, into the strategic planning procedure, into procurement procedure, and so on. And the final lesson which I learned is that it is very difficult being a risk specialist and not having deep enough understanding in other fields. And this is I think this is the key warning I want to give to all of the risk management students. It's really great that you understand risk, but it's actually not such a complex field. You have to understand risk perception and psychology, you have to understand mathematics and be able to quantify risks, and you have to understand statistics. But the third one, and this is a big one, you have to understand how business works. And that means if you're going to be in oil and gas, you need to have engineering degree, or you need to have a good understanding on how oil and gas business works. If you're going to be in an investment business, you need to have a degree in investment management, or you need to at least have subjects, a lot of subjects, and quite an in-depth understanding of how things really work. If you're going to work in pharmacy, you really have to have a scientific background as well, or you need to have someone on your team with that background. And that was my solution. I mean, I couldn't relearn everything I've done. I was, I guess, fortunate. My first degree is in risk management and my second degree is in statistics, so that was not bad, but I did struggle a lot with the business side. And that essentially means that whenever you have an option to take electives at university, I strongly encourage you to decide on what direction, what industry you want to take, and make sure you select elective subjects in that industry. It is absolutely critical for the risk manager to understand the essence, the nature of the business. So that was my journey up to now. I have taken a year off. Last year I moved to Spain to take a little break from work, and I have published a free risk management book with my colleague Elena Demidenko, which you can download absolutely free on the Risk Academy website. And from time to time I entertain myself by doing small videos like that. And if you want to see more of them, do subscribe to the Risk Academy channel on YouTube. For me, for now, thank you and goodbye.